What's the most satisfying you messed with the wrong person story you've got? Story 1. I was in India with my Swedish friend, a semi-pro handball player with some serious muscles. If you've ever been to India with a white woman, you know how people can suddenly touch girls inappropriately. I don't mean to generalize, but it's a densely populated country, and enough people behave poorly to make these encounters almost daily. It was shortly after a torrential monsoon downpour in Goa. We were strolling along a dirt path near the beach when a massive puddle blocked our way. My friend had already experienced 2 accidental incidents earlier that day and let them slide. But this time was different. 5 or 6 young lads, probably late teens or early 20s, decked out in designer jeans, sneakers, and baseball caps, despite being at the beach, strutted along, practically barricading the entire path. Their modus operandi involved physically annoying passing girls. They reached my friend, and one of them boldly ran his hand up her waist, grazing her chest. She reacted so swiftly and decisively that the guy crumpled backward, falling into the massive mud puddle, designer jeans and all. He thrashed around for a moment while we braced ourselves for his friend's potential retaliation. Yet to our surprise, they all kept their heads down and continued walking, visibly shaken, as my friend gave the guy a piece of her mind. As he tried to regain his composure, reaching for his hat which had ended up floating nearby, my friend firmly planted her foot on his chest, pushing him back into the puddle, submerging him completely. Face and all, "Stay right there until I'm out of sight," she commanded, and walked away. I glanced back, and he was still lying in the puddle even though my friend was now a good 50 meters away, patiently waiting for her to disappear from view. It was a sight to behold. Wow, that girl slayed that creep like a pro wrestler takes down a jobber. They really didn't see that coming. Story 2. My stepdad used to run the local marathon and had the unshakable conviction of his generation that justice was always on his side. He also slept bare, which I learned as a result of this incident. One late summer night, 2 stupid kids tried to steal his truck from the driveway. He saw them from his bedroom window and tore out of the house in his birthday suit, chasing the terrified kids for blocks and screaming, "I'm gonna get you!" He tackled one of them, and the cops arrived within minutes because some concerned neighbor had noticed the commotion at 2 a.m. in our sleepy little town. God only knows what that 911 call sounded like. It was a good thing the cop already knew the kid as a car thief. He sat with the sobbing team and suggested my stepdad sit in the cruiser until his wife could bring him some pants. In this everyday life with me and my mom, my stepdad was relatively low-key. Yeah, he's a great guy. Just never mess with his truck. Story 3. I enjoy hearing tales about bouncers. I used to work at a bar alongside my sister, and we had a bouncer everyone affectionately referred to as Big Mark, probably because he was absolutely massive, standing at a towering 6'8" and weighing in at around 320 pounds. He was a sight to behold, but beyond his imposing presence was a genuinely kind, funny, and sharp-witted guy. Surprisingly, I never witnessed him engage in any physical altercations. Whether someone refused to leave or got a bit too loud, Mark had a simple yet effective approach. He'd calmly say, "Stop making threats, sir," and that would resolve the situation without fail. One memorable incident involved my sister bringing an adult magazine, possibly People or something similar, to work. She and a few other servers decided to relax and look through it, exchanging playful banter about the celebrities featured. As fate would have it, the bar got busy and my sister inadvertently left the magazine on a table. Soon after, 2 middle-aged couples, already a bit tipsy, sat in the same booth. They immediately began to criticize the magazine, saying things like, "Who in their right mind reads this trash?" and similar remarks. Their mood took a dark turn as they started tearing the magazine to shreds, all while laughing uncontrollably. Amidst the chaos of the rush, my sister noticed this and grew understandably irritated. She approached Mark and informed him that these individuals had destroyed her magazine. Without hesitation, Mark rose from his seat and walked over to their table. He stood there silently, a towering presence that demanded attention. With both hands resting on the table, he lowered his voice to a menacing growl and asked, "Why did you tear up my magazine?" The 4 of them turned as pale as ghosts, their laughter abruptly silenced. They stammered out apologies and claimed they hadn't realized it was his, promptly leaving the premises. Mark was the type of guy who never sought violence, yet he possessed an innate ability to instill fear in 99% of people. As it turns out, he's a nurse now.
Shh, here's a little secret for you. This video is sponsored by none other than me and my team at Rufus Rugs. We're the masters of creating custom, hand-tufted rugs that capture who you truly are. Whether you want to transform one of our intriguing thumbnails into a rug, for a friend, obviously, or you're craving a room makeover with awesome anime-inspired designs, we've got your back. Oh, and did I mention, each and every rug is skillfully handcrafted by me and my friends. No BS dropshipping gimmick here. You'll be blown away by your rug. Hit the first link in the description to learn more.
Story 4. My dad is not a good guy. He has a short temper and is quick to anger. This made him the wrong target for 2 muggers who tried to rob him at an ATM. They approached him and demanded that he withdraw money. He grabbed one of them and slammed his head and face against a brick wall. The mugger ran away, but my dad chased him down and roughed him up. My dad had ankylosing spondylitis, a disease that caused him to hunch over. He also had white hair and looked older and weaker than he actually was, but he was tough and had a reputation for being fiercely protective of his honor. His illness made him insecure and even more likely to lash out. I've seen people mess with him over small things, only to back down when they realized that he was looking for a fight and was willing to go all out, even if they were younger or bigger than him. This incident taught me my first lesson about not messing with strangers. My dad wasn't a bully, but he wasn't afraid to stand up to people who were picking on him or others. Don't mess with people. Some go from base form to Super Saiyan real quick when they're pissed. Story 5. In middle school during lunch period, a kid in my grade was getting bullied by a larger kid and his friends. He told them to stop and leave him alone a few times, but no one watching did anything because they were just scared kids. The larger kid kept poking him and calling him names, and his friends laughed. Suddenly, the bullied kid slapped him on the head. The larger kid went ballistic. His face turned red and tears streamed down his face as he jumped on the larger kid and roughed him up, yelling, "Just leave me alone." The teachers broke up the fight and started scolding the bullied kid, but everyone who had been watching vouched for him and said he was just defending himself. I think they both got suspended anyway, but no one messed with that kid anymore. My girlfriend is dealing with something similar now. A kid with special needs in her class had a meltdown and kicked the heck out of a popular kid. My girlfriend is the kid's favorite person at school, and while 8 other kids had said that the kid had just snapped, she didn't believe them. She did some digging and found out that the popular kid had been bullying the autistic kid relentlessly for the entire school year. All the other kids are scared of the popular kid, and my girlfriend is campaigning for real consequences for him. The principal isn't cooperating, and I suspect it's because the popular kid's parents are big donors to the school. I don't think anyone is really going to mess with that kid anymore, though. Story 6. My family and I grew up in Baltimore City. The neighborhood we lived in wasn't the best, but it certainly wasn't the worst either. At the time, late 90s, early 2000s, one day, when my little brother was around 7, he was outside playing on his skateboard in the street next to our yard. A group of kids a little older than him walked by, looking to pick a fight. It all happened so fast. They ran up to my brother, started pushing him around, and stole his skateboard. My dad was home that day. My sister and I ran inside hysterically, and without even thinking twice, my dad jumped up from his lazy boy in just his t-shirt and shorts. He ran outside, barely touching the stairs, and bolted after those punk kids. This 50-year-old man chased them for like 3 blocks in his bare feet, and they were screaming in fear for their lives. They finally dropped the skateboard at some point, and my dad stopped chasing them and grabbed it. I'd never seen him so angry and move so fast. Signature angry dad warning sign. His eyes get huge and piercing, terrifyingly blue. When he came back, his feet were so red and roughed up from sprinting on the concrete through gravel roads and alleyways. We never saw those kids near our house or even around our neighborhood again. My dad is the greatest, so don't mess with his kids. Story 7. 2 incidents happened in my high school when I was a kid. In the first incident, a jerk named Rich was picking on a kid all day. He followed the kid out to the buses, taunting him the whole time. The kid just walked with his head down and his hands in his pockets. Rich said something that finally set the kid off, and he pulled his hand out of his pocket with a pencil gripped so sharp He whirled around and jabbed the pencil. In the second incident, a quiet, nerdy kid had been bullied for weeks by another kid who went to the technical school in the morning. On the way back from tech school one day, the nerdy kid told his bully, "When we get back to school, I'm going to rough you up." The bully laughed. When they got off the bus, the bully got in the nerdy kid's face and the nerdy kid whipped out a sharp object he had stolen from tech school. I worked with the second bully at the grocery store a few years later. The subject of bullying came up and I told him that he had been a jerk to the kid and that bad things happen to jerks. He didn't try to argue with me. I'm also a pretty big guy, so I doubt he would have anyway. It's brutal, but it's why you shouldn't push people to their breaking point. Stealth is an assassin's best friend. Annoying a quiet person is like messing with a seemingly harmless platypus. One elbow strike to the face, and bam, you're down, brah. Remember, messing with the wrong person will make you run like a scaredy cat. Go like this video and subscribe now. The party's just getting started. Story 8. My youngest daughter was being bullied at elementary school by a boy 2 grades above her. He would constantly taunt, push, and annoy her. One day, he pushed her from behind, causing her to drop her books. She immediately turned around and kicked him in the groin as hard as her soccer-playing leg could muster. I've been told he curled up in pain and cried for several minutes, while my daughter was sent to the principal's office. She was smiling when her mother picked her up from school. Story 9. When I went to college in Hawaii, my roommate was a huge Samoan guy who played football for the university. On the weekends, he and his friends, all really nice, mellow dudes, would pile into this old beat-up pickup truck with a camper on the back and drive down a couple of streets in Waikiki. I followed them in traffic, moving closer than people walk, because that's just what kids did back then. There were a couple of tourist guys, college-aged, on mopeds in between my car and their truck. The moped guys were obviously drunk and messing with their truck, zooming up to it and then braking hard over and over again. Once, one of the mopeds hit the truck, not hard enough to do any damage, I don't think, and the Samoan guys got out of their camper. They were big guys, and the moped guys looked scared. The Samoans sternly told the moped guys to stop messing around and to leave. The moped guys quickly got on their mopeds and drove away. We all continued on our way, and I was glad that the Samoans were there to stand up to the bullies. Story 10. When I was 5 years old, my dad took me to Walmart to get something for dinner. I saw a young couple arguing. The man started getting really angry at the woman. He stood right in front of her and said he would hurt her. He even grabbed her hair and pulled it. I was terrified. My dad shouted something to the man, and the man told my dad to leave. The next thing I knew, I saw my dad run up to the man and grab him by the arm. My dad shouted, "Don't you ever touch her again." The man pushed my dad away, but my dad stood his ground. He stared at the man with a look of determination. The man looked at me and then at my dad. He knew that he was outnumbered. He slowly walked away. I don't remember much else, but I do remember that the police were called. They didn't arrest my dad. They just talked to both of the people in the couple and then left. I'm proud of my dad for standing up to the man. He showed me that it's important to protect the people you love, even if it means standing up to someone who is bigger and stronger than you. Story 11. On my way home from a night out, I saw 3 guys surrounding a dude in an alley. Sensing something was wrong, I stopped and watched for a moment. I heard one of the guys say something like, "Just shut up and give us your stuff." The next second, all I saw was a blur of arms and legs, and then the 3 guys were flat on their backs. The lone dude who was being robbed just walked out of there, right past me, without even a glance. Well, I think I'd lose my chill if I saw that dude in action. He's like Batman taking revenge for his parents, but without the whole brooding Dark Knight thing. Story 12. One winter, while my dad was on a trip, our furnace broke. My mom went down to the basement to check it out. She figured out what was wrong and called a repair guy to explain the situation. The repair guy was on speakerphone, and I held the phone while my mom held a flashlight and inspected the furnace. I'll never forget the look on her face when she finished her explanation, and the guy replied, "Why don't you put your husband on the phone, sweetie?" She snatched the phone from my hand and shooed me out before she let him have it. I never got to hear her exact words, but I imagine he got a well-deserved earful. Story 13. I was on the bar on the back patio part with my girlfriends. This deaf woman was sitting with her other deaf friend. They looked like they were in their mid-20s, and they were just sitting there quietly singing to each other. This drunk Kevin Federline type dude came up and kept hitting on the woman. She clearly indicated non-verbally that she wasn't interested, but he still hung around, hovering over her. And by hover, He was literally hovering pressed up against her, touching her arms and back while she did her best to ignore him and talk with her friend, while occasionally indicating to him to leave her alone. Then, all of a sudden, she laid him out so fast. All I saw was him lying on his back looking dazed, while she stood over him and Helen Keller yelling at him. Story 14. I didn't witness it, but I got first-hand accounts and saw the police report. Bob was a 70-year-old Domino's delivery driver who was a bit eccentric. He was the type of guy who would give a kid a stern talking to if they were misbehaving, but he also had a soft spot for the homeless and would give them our canceled orders at the end of the night. One day, Bob was delivering a pizza when he was mugged. The mugger walked up to him and demanded his money and the pizza. Bob tried to reason with the mugger, but it was no use. The mugger was threatening to hurt him, so Bob gave him what he wanted. The mugger turned to leave, but Bob wasn't going to let him get away that easily. He picked up the brick that the mugger had dropped and stood in his way. He then got the pizza back and called the police. The mugger was so scared of the 70-year-old pizza man that he just waited for the cops to arrest him. Man, I feel Bob's rage. I'd be so cheesed if someone tried to steal my pepperoni. Story 15. My younger sister received creepy phone calls from a stranger. He would say things like, "I'm going to climb up to your bed," and "I'm watching you." My dad is a federal investigator. He got involved, and the next thing I knew, the kid was no longer allowed to have a phone without parental supervision. And here's another one. My wife was T-boned by a drunk driver right in front of a bar that a friend of ours owned. The bouncer saw the accident and saw the drunk jump out of his car and run. The bouncer chased him down, roughed him up, and dragged him back to the bar to wait for the cops. When I thanked the bouncer, he said, "Are you kidding me? That was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to give that guy what he deserved." Story 16. My mom had a habit of randomly rearranging the furniture every few months, mostly out of boredom. It was annoying at best, but not really worth getting worked up about. Usually it was just things like, the couch is here now, and the TV is over there now. Why? Oh, I don't know. I thought it looked nice. However, one time, she rearranged my bedroom. I came home from school, went up to my room, and she said, "Oh, your room is like this now." That was the last straw. While she was busy making dinner and my dad wasn't home yet, I went into her bedroom and rearranged their furniture. Pretty damn quietly, too. She never heard anything. Dad came home, went up to get changed, and yelled down the stairs to ask why she had rearranged the room. Confusion reigned. I felt like a frigging legend, and she never touched my room again. I got in a bit of trouble, but it was all worth it. Story 17. My mom told me this story after I was grown up. When she worked at a hospital in the early 70s, a really big guy, well over 6 feet tall, used to pester her. She asked him to stop several times, but he wouldn't. So she told my dad, an old-school Italian guy who was about 5'2" tall and 200 pounds. My dad went to the hospital and cornered the guy. He gave him the look and spoke through clenched teeth, telling the guy that if he bothered his wife again, he would put him in the hospital. My mom said the guy started crying. We kids remember the look. You did not mess around with my dad. The creep probably remembered what he missed in the Godfather films on that day. Don't mess with an Italian guy, or you might get an offer you can't refuse, like the offer of a hospital stay. Story 18. I was living in a city about 15 years ago that was known for a lot of serious crimes. One day, a young man, maybe 19 or 20 years old, knocked on the door of an elderly neighbor's house. In his 70s, I recall. The young man tried to force his way in, but the neighbor resisted. There was a struggle, and the old man managed to defend himself by hitting the young man with an old rotary phone. The incident was on the news, and they showed footage from inside the old man's house. There was broken stuff everywhere, and the young man had crashed through the old man's glass coffee table. They interviewed the old man, who was very kind and gentle and didn't have a scratch on him. He said something along the lines of, "I know this kid. He's friends with my grandson. I didn't want to hurt him, but criminals need to learn that they can't just break into people's houses." The young man survived, but he did end up with some injuries that he wasn't expecting to fully recover from. Story 19. A coworker of mine took really good care of her son with disabilities until he passed away. One day, a man came into our customer service department and wanted to return a product that his son had purchased. We offered to take back the product and refund his money, but he started accusing us of scamming his boy. His son was at least 20. He also told us that it was because we probably weren't parents that we were doing this. This was just a few days after the death anniversary of my coworker's son, so she was very emotional. He made a big mistake. Words were said and it felt like she tore him a new one. He left with his tail between his legs. I think this is the kind of man who spends his life bullying others. That day, he went after the wrong person. Story 20. My dad was a physically imposing man, known in our neighborhood as a gentle giant. He was quiet and restrained, but could handle himself when necessary. When I was a kid, he got cancer, and the treatment left him a shell of his former self. One day during that time, I saw him vault a fence and chase down a group of teenagers who were trying to hurt my younger sister. He caught one of them, and instead of roughing him up, he lifted him off his feet and held him there, as if weighing up the apocalyptic beating he was about to issue. But then he slowly set him down and let him go. A few days later, a bunch of those teens showed up at our door with their parents, white as ghosts. They had a signed apology letter. The parents had come to hear about what had happened, and they realized that there was no way a normally restrained man undergoing chemotherapy would react that way without reason. I think my dad's controlled rage and restraint scared the young guys even more than if he had beaten the living daylights out of one of them. Sometimes it's best to keep your cool and never ever mess with a calm man. That dad was such a Chad. He could pick up punks like they were puppy dogs and put them in air jail. I'm sure those kids had a rude awakening that day. Now that you've finished these bad stories, you're probably itching for more, right? Then go check out what's the biggest dating WTF you experienced. Story 2 was secondhand embarrassing. Don't miss it.